And a very good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Major problems in County Durham for the A1M. The motorway remains closed northbound from Aycliffe to Bradbury following a serious accident causing long queues. Banks Junction 58 at Bertree and en route through Rushford and Newton Aycliffe as you divert. On the M1 in Leicestershire, the motorway is down to a single lane southbound just before Junction 22. The Ashby de la Zouche and Colville exit, all traffic squeezing past in the outside lane where a car's caught fire. On the M5 in Worcestershire, the inside lane's closed northbound at Junction 5. The A38 Droitwich Whichfold exit following an accident involving a lorry. And in North London at Holloway, the Seven Sisters Road, the A503 closed on that one-way stretch just off Hornsey Road. A fire broke out in a building, leaving a number of firefighters on the scene attending that. And no Piccadilly line in London. Rail is lane to Uxbridge because of the bad weather. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30am.
Only on GB News.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Take a listen to this.
Where the last government failed you, this one will not.
Tough words there, and that's Keir Starmer. He was talking very tough. Why? Because immigration figures released today show that net migration last year was close to 1 million people entering this country, ladies and gents. Also announced today, Dame Andrea Jenkins, she has defected over to Reform. She reckons that our country is at a crisis point. When you hear figures like the 1 million population increase, you'll probably think she's right. But if you have a different view, tell me. Just when you think it can't get much worse, I can tell you now, also released today, costs on how much we are spending on asylum-related costs. Now, how much do you think it is per day? Sit down when you're typing me that figure. You'll need to, I can tell you that. And also, we've had an influx of pensioners that have been trying to claim pension credit following, of course, the scrapping of the winter fuel allowance. But over half of those claims have been rejected. What do you make to that? What a cheery show, everybody. Yeah, what do you make to all of that? Keeping me company to get stuck into it all and more. My panel, Kelvin McKenzie, who's the former editor of The Sun, and Paul Richards, the former Labour advisor and columnist. But before we get stuck in, and boy, is there a lot to discuss, let's get the 6 o'clock news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wenzer with your headlines. It's just after 6 o'clock. The Prime Minister has accused the previous government of running an open borders experiment while giving a press conference at Downing Street. In the latest migration data released today, net migration fell 20% in the year to June 2024, down from a record high of 906,000 in the previous year. Meanwhile, the cost of the asylum system has soared to more than £5 billion, nearly 12 times the amount spent a decade ago. Sir Keir Starmer's speech comes as the government has announced an immigration deal with Iraq. The Prime Minister used his speech to blame the Conservatives for high migration and said his government will turn the page, but refused to commit to a cap on migration. Meanwhile, the Shadow Home Secretary has responded, saying the Prime Minister has no plan and no desire to tackle the high levels of migration. Chris Philp says under Tory leader Kemi Badenoch, the Tories will learn from past mistakes and adopt a new approach to lowering immigration. The Scottish Government has announced all pensioners in Scotland will receive a winter fuel payment next year. From 2025, every pensioner in the country will receive the new benefit, with those in receipt of qualifying benefits like pension credit getting £200 or £300, depending on their age, and wealthier pensioners getting £100. It comes after both the UK and Scottish governments earlier this year axed the universal winter fuel payment, except for those in receipt of pension credit or other means-tested benefits. In other news, Kirsty Walk has accused Greg Wallace of making sexualised jokes during her time on Celebrity MasterChef in 2011. The former Newsnight host is one of 13 people to have reported inappropriate comments from Wallace over a 17-year period. Walk claims that he shared stories and jokes of sexual nature in front of contestants and crew, which she felt were really in the wrong place. Other allegations include Wallace openly discussing his sex life and making inappropriate comments to female colleagues. The 60-year-old stepped down from the cooking show as the BBC investigates the allegations. Now, 2 police officers have been served with misconduct notices after a 17-year-old girl died fleeing a patrol car on the M5 motorway. Tamsin Hall, who was autistic, escaped the vehicle near Bridgewater on the 11th of November, crossing into oncoming traffic. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is investigating how she managed to leave the vehicle while in custody. A full inquest, potentially with a jury, is scheduled for next November. And Sir Keir Starmer has spoken with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky as Russia intensifies its attacks on Ukraine's power grid. Zelensky described the assault as another act of Russian air terror, with over 90 missiles and nearly 100 drones targeting civilian infrastructure. The strike, which left 1 million homes without power, is the second in less than 2 weeks, raising concerns over a winter of crippling energy shortages. In the call, Zelensky also expressed thanks for the UK's continued support, including £3 billion in aid, and discussed strengthening defence cooperation. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Michelle.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that. My name's Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel, I've got Kelvin Mackenzie, the former editor of The Sun, and I'm sure it's a new face to the panel. If not, it's one we haven't seen for a while. Paul Richards, the former Labour advisor and columnist. Good evening to both of you. You're very welcome tonight.
Hi there.
As are each and every single one of you, what's on your mind tonight? I do hope you're sitting down, ladies and gents, because we need to talk figures. And when you hear some of these numbers and figures that we need to talk about, trust me, you will wish that you are indeed sitting down. Lots to get into, and you can join the conversation all the usual ways. You can email me, which is gbviews@gbnews.com. Go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay, or tweet or X me. Are you ready then? Here we go, everybody. Today it has all been about migration figures. We knew that this day was coming. We saw yesterday, didn't we, Kemi Badenoch? She tried to get ahead of things, essentially tough-talking, saying to everybody the figures will have come down, and it's all because of things that she reckons that the Tory party did and deserved some kind of acknowledgement for, although she did also acknowledge that they had made mistakes and got things wrong. That is an understatement, I would say. Let's start off by Keir Starmer, listening to what he had to say. He's given a press conference as well today.
Previous government were running an open borders experiment. As the ONS sets out, nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019.
So let's fast forward to the end of his speech, because he was talking very tough. Listen to how he ended his press conference.
Where the last government failed you, this one will not. They drove immigration numbers up. We will get them down. They left the NHS flat on its face. We will get it standing tall again. They made you poorer. We will put more money in your pockets. It won't be quick or easy, but we are going to turn things around, not with gimmicks, but with graft. A government that will not rest until the foundations are fixed, borders are secure, and Britain is rebuilt.
Not with gimmicks, but with graft. You're going to have to do some serious hard graft, as he's just been saying there. Almost 1 million people, net migration. I mean, just in case you don't know what that means, because we all bandy these terms around, don't we? That basically means that that is the size of the population increase. So when you take away the people that have left and the people that have come in, that is your net figure. So 906,000 people, not shy of 1 million people. Wow. What do you think to that?
I think it's shocking. I think it's a shocking legacy of the Conservative government and the multiple prime ministers that they've had over the years. It's the reason why they got thrown out with that massive majority. And I also, you didn't cover it, but the other area that I actually agree with this, so this will get me a tremendous bucket load from both sides of the argument, is that I vaguely agree with Starmer over the way that he has positioned Brexit as being a responsible area for this, because the truth about the matter is the reason those kids, those boats are coming across is because they can do, because we can't send them back. Whereas had we remained in the EU, we could have done. Now, of course, there are arguments. Yes, they're coming in by lorries, they're coming in by planes, they're coming in lots of ways. But one of the ways that they are consistently coming in is across the channel. We can't send them back. So there's a number of things Starmer said which I agree with. The bit that I don't agree with is the idea that he's going to solve any of this, right? He changes his tune every 2 minutes. 1 minute he's saying, actually, we're going to need lots of help upon this to turn it round. We can't do it on our own. And now he's saying, yes, we will do this. I admire his ambition. And when I look at what he's done over the last 5 months, I can absolutely assure every one of your viewers right now that nothing will be achieved and all you'll get is another huge tax rise.
Christopher Hurt was in that press conference. I do have to say he asked a question on your behalf, GBNews viewers. He asked essentially what kind of number then, when you say you're going to put the graft in, you're going to put the work in, you've got your plans coming up, what kind of volume would you be looking to reduce it to? I've got to say we didn't really get an answer to that. I suspect that's because no one really can put a figure on it. What do you think to what we've heard today, Paul?
Well, I mean, the numbers are breathtaking. They are off the scale. It relates absolutely to that last year of the Conservative government and the failure that they did over those years. I mean, 4 times as many since 2019 on the Tories' watch. I think Starmer's given us an enormous hostage to fortune by saying the numbers will come down, and he's staked his reputation on that, which I think politically is interesting and bold. But I thought some of the other announcements today give us a bit more hope than Kelvin is suggesting, a bit more optimism in that they're trying to tackle this at source. So the deal done with Iraq to say, look, let's try and stop people from moving in the first place, trying to tackle the small boats crisis at source, stop the boats getting anywhere near the channel before anybody's even in them, is a better approach than trying to just build a big wall, which we know doesn't work. So and I have to say, this will be really unpopular, so I'm going to light the blue touch paper now and withdraw. But also, overseas aid and building up other people's economies so they don't feel the need to actually leave and come here in the first place. Those things will get the numbers.
Is there enough?
They're bold enough to do it.
We'll take that last point. Is there enough money, actually, to give to every government in the world who's got their hand out now? You've got the whole of the Commonwealth seeking reparation. You've now got every poor country in the world saying, unless you do something about climate change, i.e. send us a cheque, we are going to start sending the people your way. I mean, we are a poor country. The latest stats are shocking. The ones that I just saw showed that we are now poorer as a nation than we were prior to the banking crisis of 2008. So ordinary people have not actually in our country, we haven't got wealthier. And yet every so often, normally a socialist comes along saying the answer is send some money overseas to somebody. And I don't think it is possible. I don't think we're wealthy enough. We've only got to stop people having 300 quid in energy to basically come very close to bringing down a government with a massive majority.
It's not a question of charity and dole-outs and all of that. Actually, the investment you make in overseas aid helps us become richer and more successful. And if it stops some of the people coming here in the first place, that that saves money. It also does us an enormous amount of good in the world. To be a nation which is involved in the world helps with trade, helps with our diplomacy, helps with our international relations, and that's got to be good for Britain. You're a patriot and so am I. We want our standing to be higher in the world.
I think you're being naive. We're just about to find out the only thing that matters in this world, unfortunately, is violence through Putin or economic strength through the United States. Nothing else matters. And us shouting out who wants 50 quid to anybody that happens to walk by is completely wrong.
I totally agree with you on Ukraine, and the victory of the Ukrainians is the most important thing any of us should be talking about, frankly. And if Putin wins, then that will shape politics.
But we're doing a lot for the Ukrainians in our country, in the sense that we've taken a lot on board, and I congratulate every single family who is tonight looking after a Ukrainian family who are worried about their future and also worried about their menfolk dying in their thousands out there. But the idea that our country is wealthy enough to start helping out other poor countries, we're going like that, and we cannot take any more of these people. The word million. This is why I dislike the Tories.
Stop it, then? You can't just build a big wall, can you? You can't just say we'll put the Royal Navy in the Channel.
OK,
You've got to stop it at source, and that's what Starmer's talking about.
Why can't you do that? Because a lot of people will be saying, well, why can't you just put the Navy in the Channel and say,
well, as Mr. Trump has discovered, borders are porous and very long, and you can build as many walls as you like. Unless you stop it happening at source, which is what Starmer's talking about with this deal with Iraq today, then people will come and they'll find.
Do you know how much we're investing in Iraq, by the way? It was 500 grand. Can I be honest with you? That is not going to go anywhere. Look, I'm in favour of the deals. I am in favour of deals. Let's just see what happens to any of this. I guarantee we have more people from Iraq who suddenly discover that there is a place called the UK than we had before. 500 grand won't touch the sides. Look, I'm in favour of us trying anything that might work. But the one thing we weren't prepared to try, of course, was sending people to Africa, which I suspect it looks like a better idea every day that it has been canned by the socialists.
Absolutely.
I do just want to pick up on this Iraq thing because, yes, everyone's getting very excited about this deal. Apparently, it's a world first, the UK and Iraq. But as you say, it's only about half. I mean, I say only because £500,000 is a lot of money. I'm just saying in the grand scheme of things. So you've got 300 grand for Iraq law enforcement training in border security. You've got £200,000 to support projects which will enhance capabilities concerning migration, and then apparently a £300,000 sum of money to tackle wider crime, to disrupt things like drug flows and crime in Iraq. Many people will be saying, well, why are we in this country spending £300,000 to try and stop drugs circulating in Iraq? I've also got to point out that the key countries that were involved in sending people over to the UK, India, Nigeria, Pakistan, China and Zimbabwe. I mean, Iraq's not even up there.
It's in top 10, to be fair. That list is part of the top 10. Iraq is also in the top 10. The reason you disrupt the drugs trade,
where's the returns agreements then?
The reason you disrupt the drugs trade, for example, is that the drugs gangs are the same as the people smuggling gangs. If you can disrupt the criminals at source, it stops people coming. And by the way, I've been to Iraq. 500,000 goes an awfully long way in a country like Iraq. So you can have more bang for your buck with that and doing it there and trying to stop it from here.
People, I think, would be happier, Paul, if rather than 500 grand here and 200 grand there, if there was an announcement that actually we've secured returns agreements with countries like Iraq. I also found more money being spent. I actually thought we were skint as a nation. Kelvin was teeing up that quite nicely. We don't seem to have a lot of money to help ourselves on the streets of Britain and our pensioners and people like that.
We're still the sixth biggest economy in the world. We're not doing too bad. Let's not talk us down, Michelle. Let's not talk down the economy. We're doing all right.
£1.98 billion announced for the World Bank today. This is after about 4 days after we'd announced £310 million for the World Health Organisation as well. And there'll be many people out there that sit and say, we can't even keep our own pensioners. Well, we could. We just refuse to. We refuse to prioritise keeping our own pensioners warm, but yet we seem to have an open-ended blank chequebook for all of the ills, so it seems, in the rest of the world.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say it's not enough money and it's only 500k and then say, well, it shouldn't be anything at all because we're so poor. I would say that the money is there and you get a return on that cash, which actually
is there any? Show me a sign in the migration numbers right, since 2019, which would indicate giving any money to anybody, including the United Nations, has had one single decent return.
But this kind of approach that Starmer's doing today, we haven't tried yet. You know, that is quite an interesting, innovative style. You endorsed it yourself.
Well, I'm in favour of most things, but for 500 grand, I'm in favour of it. But if it were 5 million, I definitely wouldn't be.
What's interesting and innovative? What?
Well, because it's about, instead of saying, you know, stop the boats or some other stupid...
Or smash the gangs, how about that? What a unique idea that would be.
Because you're choking it off at the source, and actually money spent upstream probably saved money downstream. That's why it's interesting.
We've been
and let's see if it works, shall we? If it doesn't work, we'll do something else. But this is not a bad idea.
Do something else.
Let's not poo-poo it straight away, I would say.
No,
let's see if it works.
I just think we've got a foreign aid budget. We spend a small fortune. We can't even afford, apparently, to look after our own pensioners. We're doing things that I don't think we should be doing to the farmers, and actually people just don't have the political will to do what many of the viewers watching and listening to this will want them to do, which is actually turn those boats back and make a point-blank statement that anybody that enters this country via a way of a small boat, you will not even get your claim considered. That, I know, is what many of you want the Prime Minister to be saying at home. I hear you, and I'll involve you in the conversation after the break, but we're talking about sums of money. Sit down. Put your thinking caps on and you tell me, how much do you think we are now spending, because new figures came out today, when it comes to the cost of asylum in this country every single day? You tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The way in which children are being driven online because we're not taking them seriously offline. And what we're tending to do is seeing the problems entirely on the social media, forgetting the fact that we've given up on children being able to work independently and play independently outdoors. We've basically created a world where the digital bedroom has become this go-to area for a lot of young kids. We've given up on old-fashioned parenting, where we try to cultivate their resilience. And now we blame everything, all the problems that occur online. You have to remember that if you take something like bullying, bullying doesn't have to only take place online. It happens all the time, offline, in everyday life. But yet we only see the problem on the social media, and there's this obsession with the social media where every single problem that afflicts childhood is blamed on it. And that distracts us from actually understanding what we're doing wrong with children. So for me, and I hate when I see children with digital technology, when I see them with smartphones. I'm not a fan. I'm much more concerned about the fact that parents use their digital phones when they're having dinner with their kids and giving very bad examples in relation to that. But the real problem, it seems to me, is offline, and that's why we've got to crack the issue. So for me, the banning issue is entirely a headline-grabbing political gambit. And I think that we should be much more focused on the real problems rather than delude ourselves that anything will improve.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry alongside you. Till 7, Kelvin McKenzie and Paul Richards remain alongside me. Lots of you getting in touch. Mel says, Michelle, we should give Keir Starmer a chance. Yeah, I mean, let's hope it actually does work. Matt says, if Starmer was so confident in what he's doing, why wouldn't he have set out and agreed to targets today and actually quantified and put some figures around that? Kevin says, didn't Starmer oppose lots of measures to try and control immigration in the last Parliament? Niall says that last year's figures were lower than this year's figure, I believe. Yes, but, I mean, I don't even quite know how. When you're the Office of National Statistics, you literally just have one job to do. I mean, and the clue is in the title of your department there. They managed to mess the figures up.
Yeah.
So they had to revise the figures up. So that's why now people are celebrating and saying that essentially the figures were 20% lower, because what they're doing is they're comparing it to the revised up figure. So basically, we're pretty much in the same position there or thereabouts as we was for the original prediction. You with me? Do you get me? Basically, the short version of that story is that ONS need to learn to count. Look, John says, are you sure? Nearly 1 million migrants a year. Yes, John, I am sure. Simon says, Michelle, it's very simple. Stop the pull factors. If you stop the pull factors, then you will stop people trying to illegally enter this country. Jax, you make a very good point. You said the trouble is that none of these politicians will be brought to account about their immigration figures, not a single one. I noticed Kemi Badenoch, she didn't even apologise yesterday. She acknowledged she did wrong, but she didn't apologise. Anyway, look, I told you to sit down, didn't I? I was going to talk to you about the costs, because it's not just immigration figures that have been released today, it's the costs of how much we are spending on asylum claims. Are you ready, ladies and gents? So many of you have got in touch. I told you to make sure that you're sitting down. £5.4 billion a year we are spending on asylum costs. Let me just break this down for you. This averages approximate £15 million a day, 105 million a week, 450 million a month. You heard that right. £5.4 billion a year. What do you think to this, Kelvin McKenzie?
Well, it's a shocking number, but it's the result of shocking inability of our country to keep people who want to come here, keep them out. And the open border expression which Starmer used, I agree with. We don't seem to be able to control our borders. And we are an island nation. So I hesitate to think what the rest of Europe is actually going through right now. We have to be tough. And in being tough, we're going to be unpopular. But it's the only future that this country has. Unless we want to completely change, there will be people in our country, open border people, who actually think this is rather a good idea, that the changing shape and culture of our nation and the rents going up and the inability to go and see your GP and the fact that the roads are always packed and the fact you can't get your kids into schools with your siblings, that these are good things. These are things which are being dramatically increased by the fact that we have illegal and legal migration at the same time.
Who are those people? Who thinks that? I don't know anyone who thinks that, on the left or
right.
right.
Well, normally there's a bloke sitting where you're sitting now who'd actually be cheering home every single one of the things I say.
There's a conversation about immigration, which I'm happy to have that argument, but nobody wants public services falling over because you can't get...
Yeah, no, they would prefer to have an open border. Well, you know the guys, they come on here all the time. They are members of the left. Now, the fact is you are on the right of the left. I often sit opposite people there. Yeah. Honestly, people should walk in front of them with a bell. To be honest, they're absolutely mad. But this is what we're seeing.
Yeah.
We're probably, I don't know, I consider myself lucky. Michelle's lucky, I'm not sure. Don't know you well enough to know whether you're lucky. But I don't live in those challenged circumstances. I saw stats the other day. These were stats for 2022. That 66.5% of all the babies born in London were born of foreign mothers, right? Then I looked at the similar stats which were another year older for Birmingham, which was like 40 to 44.5, right? We are seeing big changes that are happening, and this is caused by 1 million people coming in, 740,000 people coming in, 728,000 people, 166,000 people. Oh, where did they come from? Oh, it's those idiots at the ONS. Oh, they're the ones that want to go on strike, by the way, because it's been insisted that they come into work. I mean, we have, these are massive, don't you think these are massive numbers and are worrying numbers?
Absolutely.
They worry the hell out of me.
Do you know who I would go after, though? I'd go after... I live in a seaside town, and I've seen hoteliers absolutely minting it because of these asylum hotels.
But what can you do about that?
Well, I would go after them, and
why don't we go after? Why don't we go after the people that
stop the profiteering out of this misery and say, for heaven's sake, you shouldn't be made a millionaire because you have a crumbling hotel absolutely packed to the gunnels with asylum seekers.
Honestly, you're not now blaming migration on the hoteliers, are you?
No,
I mean, give us a break. They have to stay somewhere. They could come and live around your house.
What I'm saying is that you shouldn't be able to profit from it in the way that some of these people
how do you mean?
Them driving around in their Lambos because they've made money out of it.
How do you mean?
I'd go after them. Wouldn't you?
I'm not in favour of people making excess profits. However, I am in favour of those people not sleeping on the streets, which is the alternative. Look at Margate. Look at some parts of Dover. Look at some of these seaside towns. I agree with you. Why do you think that anyway, we'll come to this in a minute. But the situation now, I really feel, with 1 million people coming into our country, right, legal or illegal, right, we are seeing a change. I'm not sure anybody voted for that. I hate the Tories for what they did, by the way. This is not a Labour. This is going to become a Labour issue. But the Tories were to blame.
That's where we loop back to one of our viewers there, saying, let's give it a chance. I think that's where we're at, is that, we've got to change the government. There's change in the air. And this is a different approach.
Having seen what they've done over the last 5 months, how confident do you feel?
Well, I'm optimistic.
Okay.
I am one of life's optimists. And
OK. In relation to socialism, I'm a pessimist.
I think we give the guy a bit of leeway and see what happens, and judge us in 4 years' time, see if it works.
He said today, didn't he, that he was going to, next step, there's going to be a white paper prepared and some plans and so on and so forth. Why hasn't that already been done? Why, before you come to the office? You know what everyone knows what the issue is, and we can all see what the issue is. And you say nobody voted for this. I would go a step further, and I would say people proactively voted actively against this. I would argue that the Brexit referendum all those years ago, one of the core components of that was that people wanted to see immigration control. So it's gone on for years that people have proactively voted to reduce the figures, and actually we've got the exact opposite. So why then isn't the next government, i.e. now Labour, when they're coming to the office, you're prepared? Why aren't you coming in with white papers, with plans? Like, what is it that you've suddenly just discovered?
Well, exactly that is that you come into office, and I've been in government, and there's a load of stuff you discover that hasn't been said out loud at the official brief you on. And as you said yourself, the ONS, got the numbers wrong. A lot of the economic projections, it turns out, were wrong, and a lot of the numbers were hidden from the public. So when you're in government and you open those books and your officials are talking to you, you realise the scale of the mess you're inheriting, and that's what the ministers.
If you were running the government and they came in and they said, "Oh, look, there's been a slight error here.
Oops,
we've just discovered. We looked under that settee and we found 166,000 migrants.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Would you just go out and they said, fresh data? Did you see that? New data, fresh data. What would you do? Would you fire? Just fire? Shut the whole bloody thing down? What is the point? What is the point? No, all right, don't shut it down. But shouldn't somebody stand up and say, I made a terrible error? Honestly, 166,000 is so enormous. The cost and the economic aspects of it are so bad. I am going.
I would
hand him a check.
I would, without being sort of too technical about it, I'll put it in front of a select committee, and there's a Home Office select committee whose job it is to investigate this kind of misuse of public money or, methodologies that don't work and all that. And I'd put that guy in front of a select committee and beat him up on air, to find out what went wrong. I think that's an entirely reasonable thing to do because the way they were counting them obviously wasn't the right way. Standing there with a clipboard didn't seem to work, so they've had to change it, and that's where all these extra numbers have come from.
I just wonder what other numbers. What other numbers are we sitting there thinking about? For instance, economic numbers, for instance, from the Treasury. How do we know that any of those are... If you can make 166,000 people mistake.
Yeah.
What about just moving across the ledger?
Yeah.
You know, suddenly, 10 billion disappears.
Which is why I think the government has to be judged on how people feel in their pockets, in their communities in 4 years' time. It isn't going to be about headline figures and big numbers and billions and all that. It's, do you feel a bit richer? Do you feel that your kids are going to get a better future? Can you afford your home? It's those simple bread and butter things.
Okay,
That's how it should be judged.
So when we look at where we are right now, most of the people I know, feel very gloomy about the current outlook. Okay, he talks about people having more money in their pocket and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Why on earth would he say that? Does he ever meet any ordinary people? I'm not criticising his pay or his wife's pay or the size of his house or anything. That's life. That's a roll of the dice. But surely, But so why on earth would he say something like that? I found that utterly bizarre. He obviously doesn't know anybody.
Hang on. And one of the great strengths of our political system is that all these guys are constituency MPs too, and then he has a surgery full of people on a Friday and a Saturday coming in with all kinds of
He never goes to that constituency, does he?
Of course he does.
Why would he?
They are all constituency MPs and they listen to their constituents all the time.
As the Prime Minister, he is listening.
Yes, he's doing casework.
In Islington, he's listening.
He's doing casework. He's got people coming through the door with problems.
What the idea? The Prime Minister is sitting there while Tom comes in and says, "My bike's been stolen and the cops haven't come around."
That is the joy of our system. For that moment, they are our representative and they work for us. And
it's all done through the agent. That
is a much better system than most.
It's all done through the agent. He wouldn't recognise the constituents if he trod on them.
That's really unfair. That's totally
One
unfair.
of my viewers, Alan, you've got in touch and said Paul's referencing hoteliers getting rich. Who is giving them the money? He says, you. Alan, you, the taxpayers, me, all of us, we are giving the money. And we're not just giving it to hoteliers, I have to say, because anyone that's familiar with the rental market in this country will know that huge companies, they go up and down the towns and cities in this country holding landlord events where they proactively try and get people to sign a deal with these massive organisations. And these deals are very, very lucrative. They can be up to 5 years, no void periods, maintenance taken care of. It's very, very attractive. So now what we've got is this whole new second market that's been spawned. Spend 2 seconds on TikTok and you'll see it. People showing people go to northern towns and cities, places like where I'm from, buy up all of these cheap properties, stick these people in it, and your quid's in. What about the community, though, that actually has to live in those areas? So people are making a fortune. You say millionaires. There was a report the other day that one owner of one of these companies, he's on track, everyone, to become the first billionaire off this sector. You heard me right there. The first billionaire, apparently. I mean, it's absolutely appalling. It's absolutely out of control. The party that think that they can handle it the best is Reform UK. There was another press conference today held by Nigel Farage. He was talking yet again tough on this issue and also announcing a defection. But all is not well in the Reform UK camp, because you saw one in, Andrea Jenkins, you saw one out, Ben Habib. Let's look at all of that after the break.
Time for a weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A little bit of mist and fog around this evening. Overall, though, won't be as cold as last night, not as frosty. And most places are going to be dry. There's some pretty wet weather coming into western Scotland thanks to these weather fronts pushing north. High pressure sitting across eastern England. That's where we've got the light winds. That's where the fog is quite thick this evening. Parts of Lincolnshire down into East Anglia. A few patches elsewhere too. Generally clearing though as the night goes on because the breeze will pick up. Staying soggy though across northern Scotland. Rain across the Western Isles may ease, but staying very wet across parts of Orkney and Shetland. Most places there will have a dry night, not as frosty as last night for sure. Still pretty chilly first thing tomorrow across eastern England. We'll have that cloud and rain still across Orkney and Shetland's early doors. That should be scooting away to the north. Nothing like as cold as this morning across Scotland. Most places will start above freezing. Quite gusty though across the west coast and at times across the northeast. Quite blustery conditions here during the day. A bit more of lighter wind further south, but just enough breeze, as I say, to clear away that fog this evening. So it should be a fine start across much of eastern England. staying dry and bright here for most of the day. In the west, we'll see that cloud thickening, the breeze picking up, blustery conditions in western Scotland at times for Northern Ireland and northeast Scotland too. And you can see rain coming in here as well. So turning damp for Northern Ireland, western Scotland, bit of showery rain for the west coast of Wales, Devon and Cornwall by the end of the day. But look at the numbers here. We could see temperatures into the teens. Another pretty chilly feeling day across the east. By the weekend, though, it's going to be much milder everywhere. Quite a lot of cloud around. Could see some sunny spells coming through northeast England, at times northeast Scotland. Bit of showery rain moving across Scotland for a time. But again, most places will be dry. But temperatures on the rise, double digits everywhere, and some places into the teens on Saturday, and similar temperatures Sunday too.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays continue in County Durham for the A1M, which is partly blocked northbound between the Aycliffe and Bradbury exits after an accident. Recovery work is underway. There are queues on surrounding routes through Rushford and Newton Aycliffe as you were diverting. There's also a breakdown in the queues, not helping matters. Now, the M1 in Leicestershire is down to one lane southbound on that three-lane stretch. Just before junction 22, the Ashby de la Zouche turn-off, a car was on fire. Recovery work is underway. On the M5 in Worcestershire, one lane's closed northbound at junction 5, the A38 exit for Droitwich and Wychbold following an accident involving a lorry. The Essex stretch of the M25 is blocked clockwise from the M11 to the A12 following an accident. And staying in Essex between Basildon and Wickford, the A132 Nevenden Road has been closed just off the A127 following a serious accident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, if you just tuned in, my panel, I've got Kelvin Mackenzie, the former editor of The Sun, and Paul Richards, the former Labour advisor and columnist. One of my viewers, Sue. Michelle, I just feel so depressed. I've never heard so many ordinary people that just want to leave the country. I feel completely like no politicians are serving the people anymore. That got a round of applause from Kelvin. Sometimes I think I'd like to just set up an island just with all decent, nice people, not have anyone on there that wants to commit crime or anything like that. But where would we go, everybody? What would we do? And how long would it take before people actually came to that island as well? Keep the faith, Sue. That's all I can say. GB News is the People's Channel. We're here. We'll vent together and we'll get through it together. I can assure you of that. Reform UK, Nigel Farage doing a press conference today to announce a couple of things. They announced that they have exceeded 100,000 members. They regard themselves now as the official opposition. And they also announced a defection as well. Their 100,000 member was actually Dame Andrea Jenkins. Let's listen to her, some of the things that she had to say.
Today I've joined the party of the brave. Our once great country is at a crisis point. Labour's record speaks volumes already, you must agree. They have compromised our British territories, fleeced our farmers, and they're punishing our pensioners. In the past 5 months, as we've seen, our British people have been locked up for expressing their opinions, while real criminals are being released early onto our streets. This is not the Britain that we deserve.
I was listening to that, I was thinking, I'm astonished that you've never been locked up for your opinions, quite frankly, Kelvin Mackenzie.
A lot of people would like to. I've got good lawyers.
What? So she's basically saying there, the country in crisis. She's going to be running in the mayoral elections at Greater Lincolnshire. What do you think to her defection?
First of all, I don't know politically whether she's a genius or not. Decent lady. I think she'll do well in the mayoral race. Lincolnshire is going to be a great hub for reform. Richard Tice is already an MP there, and they're very hopeful that they're going to win plenty of seats in the county council elections. I think they will do surprisingly well. Everybody hates every party now. They hate Labour. Lib Dems don't exist, basically, and the Tories, I think, still have a time to be hanging about in the shadows before they can come out and say, look, it's a brand new Conservative party. So I wish them well, because there is nothing like having a small start-up having a go. For instance, that's why GB News does so well. So I I'm not quite sure how they're going to do once it comes to a general election, although I do think they'll do spectacularly in Wales in the Senedd, where I expect them to get between 30 and 35%, knocking Labour right onto their backside, which will be the first time that will have happened in politics in Wales almost since the day God was a boy.
Paul?
I think it's an incredible coincidence, that isn't it? She happens to be the 100,000th member. What an amazing stroke of luck. And then she's there reading out a statement like she's a hostage, reading out a hostage statement. I think they've started this whole campaign with an enormous amount of sort of, you know, spin worthy of Tony Blair, frankly.
Well, let's hope he's as successful as Tony Blair.
Do they think we're stupid? You know, I just think the whole thing is a confection and just treating us like idiots, really. Now, the bigger question is...
So tell me what's wrong then. So the whole thing is a confection. Pick one thing. What's your issue?
Well, it's not authentic. And she's just reading out a statement, I think, written by someone else. And I think it's, you know, it's all a stunt, isn't it?
Oh, now, that is a ridiculous thing to say.
No, it's not.
Most politicians are reading out pieces of written stuff written by somebody else.
They do, and that's one of the ways I make my money. But at least they try and sound like they mean it, and I don't think she did. I have to say, though, the bigger point, Kelvin's point, is about can reform break through? And that is one of the big questions of our age, I think, and certainly the last election, you know, below the level of Labour beating Tories, which was the sort of headline, was the incursion of reform. And there's so many seats now where Labour has a Labour MP, but in second place is a reform candidate. And you saw in all kinds of weird and wonderful places, you know, just enormous upsurge from nowhere with reform candidates.
The Tories did not want to vote Tory. That is the truth.
Well,
they didn't want to vote Tory. They were sick and tired of them.
Every 100 years or so, you know, parties fail and new parties emerge. I mean, the last time, I suppose, was when the Liberal Party collapsed and Labour took over, you know, a long time ago. But it does happen. And I'm just wondering if we're in that inflection point now, you know. And they're saying they're the main opposition, but at the moment, it's about taking over from the Conservatives, isn't it? Yeah. But we're not that
I thought Badnoch made a good speech last night. It was clever duff. You know, she basically apologised.
She didn't apologise.
She came damn close to apologising. Right? She said she'd have a hard cap for migration, and that she would contemplate ECHR exit. Right?
Late now, though.
Right. Now she did that. This is her issue. This is her issue. If she doesn't do a deal with Farage, right, a proper deal, Farage, your Home Secretary, various other things like that, right, then I'm afraid I think Farage will take so many votes off her.
Do you not think, though, that kind of backroom, smoke-filled rooms, and in Nigel's case it would be a smoke-filled room deal, right, is an insult to the voters, and the voters. No,
I don't think it'd be a backroom deal. They'd say this is what we're going to do because a whole load of Tory candidates would have to stand aside for reform candidates.
But don't you think the voters in their seats will say, "Why aren't you giving us a choice? If we want to vote for a Tory, there should be a Tory candidate."
No, they say we want to win. What we're saying is we want to serve the right. Yeah. The left are OK. There's such a broad church.
I always feel the public are insulted by that kind of manipulation.
Right. Well, we'll find out.
Well, you're the public. Do you feel manipulated? Do you feel insulted? Dame Andrea Jenkins was in today. Ben Habib was out today. So many of you are getting in touch with me about Ben Habib, I can tell you. We'll explore that bit after the break.
Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan from 8 p.m.
You know, whenever I want to have a laugh, I will fire up a Ricky Gervais special on Netflix. He's funny, isn't he? Very politically incorrect. I might watch a vintage episode of Fawlty Towers if it hasn't been cancelled. Or I could just read up on the latest musings from the Welsh Labour government. And this week they have waged war on the countryside, which is apparently unwelcoming to British people of colour. Well, it's true, isn't it? I mean, those racial checkpoints in the Wye Valley are completely unacceptable. And the snowy bits of Mount Snowdon scream white privilege. Can you believe this story? It's proof, if you needed it, that Welsh Labour are barking mad and talking a load of shih tzu.
I think what's so interesting about this, I mean, this is an absurd question. This is ridiculous. Obviously, dogs and the countryside are not inherently racist. I think this entire connection between what is effective cultural Marxism, in addition to what is effective socialism, that is at the heart of Welsh Labour and many other hard left groups in the United Kingdom.
I got to do a correction
Go
because
on.
it's not Welsh Labour. It was one little thinky tanky that did some research. I know it was taxpayer funded, but it was just a suggestion. Welsh Labour have not gone, yes, that's a good idea. This research, which I wholly agree is quite absurd, was done by interviewing the 4% ethnic minorities of Wales, and they came out with the fact that they don't feel welcome in green spaces because there are so many dogs, and that's how this was born. I mean, I don't know whether that
It's
makes
ridiculous.
it make any more sense.
And the fact that taxpayers are footing the bill for research like this is the real scandal. That we had this earlier conversation about the National Health Service, where all of our money is going and being wasted, and it is also being wasted on absolute nonsense like this.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, everybody. Michelle Dewberry, Kelvin McKenzie and Paul Richards alongside me till 7. Lots of you getting in touch about reform. Leo thinks that Dame Andrew Jenkins will be a great fit for reform. You feel very optimistic about the future. Ian, the Tories are gone. They've had their day. Reform is the future. He says, Ben says that unless we actually reform the electoral system in this country and have something like a proportional representation system, he thinks that actually parties like Reform will continue to struggle. Lots and lots of you that are getting in touch about Ben Habib. I mentioned that. Andrew Jenkins in, Ben Habib out. Anyone that watches this programme will absolutely know who Ben Habib is. He was very affiliated with Reform UK. He's issued quite a lengthy statement today saying that he's parting company with them. He gives a variety of different reasons. He says things like policy disagreements. He feels that Brexit was never, ever really done and that we've betrayed people in Northern Ireland, as an example. He has a dislike to Richard Tice comments that he made on this channel, actually, where he described attendees at an event that had been organised in part by Tommy Robinson. He called them that lot and said he essentially didn't associate with them. A lot of people took offence to that, including Ben Habib. And there was other things as well, such as how the country has actually changed because of mass migration and the pace and the scale of it and disagreements there. What do you think to this?
I think it's an example of how the revolution always devours its own children, really. I think as soon as the reform gets to a certain size, it is going to start imploding. And I think, political parties do this. They form factions and there are breakaways from left and right. And the bigger they get, the more of this kind of personality politics, this falling out, this kind of, narcissism over small differences will just start to be even more a factor, really.
So nothing to see here, essentially. Business as usual, politics as usual. Kelvin?
Well, there is an element of that. I agree with that. I think this is a Nigel Farage beast. And as long as Nigel remains healthy and has the energy to both be in Clacton, Washington and Westminster and Paddington, the GB News studio, or Westminster studio.
He's missing votes in Westminster, isn't he? So he's here, but he's not voting on behalf of people at Clacton.
Then it will be a success. He represents something in our country, which is a lot better than Starmer does, right? Who represents a rather kind of upward looking down on you.
He didn't vote against curbs on smoking, did he? Which you would think would be one of his issues. He was here presenting a television programme.
Well,
nothing wrong with that.
He can reach more people on the TV set than he ever can to 600. In fact, we say normally about 84 MPs in a parliament.
But also, I mean, I've got to say, because he's not here to defend himself, what he would say about that smoking issue is he would say the numbers were so swayed anyway. There was such a big majority on that vote that his one vote,
that's an argument for him never turning up again on that basis, because the majority is going to be the same every vote. You know, he's supposed to be there representing people on fair dues.
Let me just very quickly tell everyone, because I've only got a couple of minutes. In Scotland, the winter fuel payment, the allowance, that's essentially in a slightly different form, going to be reinstated next year. Is that the right move?
Right, well, the situation, I'd love to know how it is that the Scots, who exist totally at the God bless you of rather clever people in England, since if they had to rely on the money that they create, they'd be very lucky to be able to afford one lump of coal, let alone an entire energy bill being met. What has happened to this energy is absolutely incredible.
I have to say, I'm quite glad that pensioners like Kelvin don't get the winter fuel allowance. It goes to better people than you, I'm afraid.
So you support the removal of it? People got in touch yesterday when we were talking about these free school breakfasts for kids. What they were saying
that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, but would you support paying for his kid's breakfast when he can clearly afford to pay for his own kid? This is the issue. Why for children,
because you don't want to,
winter fuel
because you shouldn't stigmatise.
Can I just point out there have been periods in my life where I couldn't have afforded my own breakfast, right? So the idea that I'm some rather rich fat cat, but he's sitting there scooping up millions is ridiculous.
But his argument is you shouldn't get your 200 quid or whatever because you can provide for yourself. And
I'm absolutely in favour of that, but we should give it to the skin.
Because I know last night I read all your emails. I can't read them all out whilst I'm on air, but I read them all over the course of the evening. And so many of you got in touch last night saying, why do Labour think it's OK to means test things on pensioners who have literally paid into the system their whole working lives and taken very little out on most occasions. But yet when it comes to children of the very wealthy, apparently there's no means testing and that's absolutely fine. The other flip side of that is the point that you're making, Paul, which is you can't punish the children for the parents' kind of spending decisions, and perhaps if everyone's equal when it comes to the schools, the stigma, if it was there, is removed. You lot can have the final say on that at home. Thank you very much for your company tonight, Paul. Thank you very much for yours as well, Kelvin. And as always, thank you so much to each and every single one of you. I very much appreciate you spending your last hour with me. Have a good evening, and I'll see you tomorrow. Night.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time for a weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A little bit of mist and fog around this evening. Overall, though, won't be as cold as last night, not as frosty. And most places are going to be dry. There's some pretty wet weather coming into western Scotland thanks to these weather fronts pushing north. High pressure sitting across eastern England. That's where we've got the light winds. That's where the fog is quite thick this evening. Parts of Lincolnshire down into East Anglia. A few patches elsewhere too. Generally clearing though as the night goes on because the breeze will pick up. Staying soggy though across northern Scotland. Rain across the Western Isles may ease, but staying very wet across parts of Orkney and Shetland. Most places there will have a dry night, not as frosty as last night for sure. Still pretty chilly first thing tomorrow across eastern England. We'll have that cloud and rain still across Orkney and Shetland's early doors. That should be scooting away to the north. Nothing like as cold as this morning across Scotland. Most places will start above freezing. Quite gusty though across the west coast and at times across the northeast. Quite blustery conditions here during the day. A bit more of lighter wind further south, but just enough breeze, as I say, to clear away that fog this evening. So it should be a fine start across much of eastern England. Staying dry and bright here for most of the day. In the west, we'll see that cloud thickening, the breeze picking up, blustery conditions in western Scotland at times for Northern Ireland and northeast Scotland too. And you can see rain coming in here as well. So turning damp for Northern Ireland, western Scotland, bit of showery rain for the west coast of Wales, Devon and Cornwall by the end of the day. But look at the numbers here. We could see temperatures into the teens. Another pretty chilly feeling day across the east. By the weekend, though, it's going to be much milder everywhere. Quite a lot of cloud around. Could see some sunny spells coming through northeast England, at times northeast Scotland. Bit of showery rain moving across Scotland for a time. But again, most places will be dry. But temperatures on the rise. Double digits everywhere and some places into the teens on Saturday. And similar temperatures Sunday too.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
A very good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Aberdeenshire to the southwest of Stonehaven. The A90 is blocked just by the Fadoon turn-off. Investigation works underway following a serious accident. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, the motorway is down to 2 lanes clockwise just before the Carrington exit junction 8. The 2 outside lanes are blocked off. It's crawling past the scene of an accident. The M1 really slow southbound in Leicestershire after a car caught fire just before junction 22. The Ashby de la Zouche turn-off. All restrictions have been lifted, but it's still queuing back towards the East Midlands Airport turn-off, and really slow on the northbound M40 in Oxfordshire after an earlier crash just north of Bicester. On the M5 in Worcestershire, 1 lane's closed northbound at junction 5 at the A38 following an accident involving a lorry, and in North London at Holloway, Seven Sisters Road closed on that one-way stretch after a fire broke out in the building. I'm Johnny Ratner.